My name is J.C. Labowitz. I live in Alexandria, Virginia. I am a member of the Grinnell class of 1971. I'm a lawyer. I do things that include challenging the accepted wisdom. And I can trace the origins of that back to Kathy Carlson and what she did in October of 1968.
J.C. Labowitz experienced Grinnell College in the turbulent years of the late 1960s, a time when Grinnell students increasingly questioned decisions made by the administration and redefined the practice of self-governance. In an interview for the Alumni Oral History Project, Labowitz tells us how an act of self-governance changed his view of the world in the long run. But what does it mean to practice self-governance? Often referred to as self-gov today, this principle in Grinnell's guidelines is based on the belief that students must act as responsible, respectful, and accountable individuals in their community. The idea of self-gov dates back to the late 1900s, but as a dynamic concept, it has been subject to change over time. One of these major shifts in thinking about self-governance took place in the 1960s, when students claimed the right to self-determination in a much more radical sense than before. The era was marked by transforming social forces, like the anti-war movement spawned by the missions in Vietnam, the civil rights movement, a new wave of feminism, the sexual revolution, and a growing mistrust in the older generation. All of these sentiments were represented on campus, and some became very visible in a dispute about visitation hours in 1968. Until then, the campus had been separated into a North Campus for men and a South Campus for women, and while the campuses became successively integrated at the time, strict visitation hours still applied to persons of a different sex, a rule dictated and enforced by the administration. That is, up until October of 1968.
Kathy Carlson of the class of 1969, who was the president of Langan Hall, which was a women's dorm, declared home rule. She declared that the residents of Langan Hall would no longer be subject to any rules imposed on them, that the women of Langan Hall would only accept rules that they themselves created, which touched off the social revolution that goes on till today at Grinnell College.
Carlson simply reinterpreted and executed her right to practice self-governance. Other dorms soon followed the example of Langan Hall, and the Senate conducted a vote on home rule. With the majority voting in favor of self-regulation in the dorms, college president Glenn Leggett eventually had no other choice than to accept the new regulations.
It was obviously not a random act. It was part of a long process, but it was so significant to me that that she as a student, and therefore I as a student and as a human being, could challenge any accepted wisdom as no longer acceptable or wise. And that has been the way I have lived my life since then.
What students reportedly considered most important in the establishment of home rule was not just more extensive visitation hours, but a voice in the democratic process. While the understanding of self-governance had gradually changed over time in the 1960s, the declaration of home rule would be of major significance. And as J.C. Labowitz tells us, it would not only be significant for the residents of Langan Hall, but for the entire student body and the way it participated in decision-making at Grinnell.
Change is inevitable. Change is a force that cannot be ignored. Change is a constant, and we all have to learn to deal with change. Not just on whether or not women can have male visitors in their dorm rooms at Grinnell College, but on a larger scale. It was a very meaningful real-world experience.